We're back at this. And guess what?
Come closer.
We're gonna talk about data protection and data privacy again. So I have my cheat sheet here. So cool. Quick intro on you, Pascal.
No, ladies first, no?
Oh, thank you.
Okay, I'll go first.
On
So,
you.
hi, Pascal, and I'm VP Startups at Scaleway. Scaleway, we are a European cloud computing company, second largest one, I would think. We are a 22 years old company, subsidiary of one of the largest telecom group in Europe called Iliad. And so I joined Scaleway 4 years ago, and managed the startup program.
Nice, nice. Shirley.
Hello, I'm Shirley. I'm in the space for 7-8 years now, most of the time being based out of Crypto Valley Zug, Switzerland. Earlier, I built up another layer one, which was actually, the first iteration of it was artificial intuition delegated proof of stake, where we analyzed 80 different parameters on the network and created a self-optimizing network and self-learning. And currently I'm working on layer one called Partisia as a chief of growth. And Partisia utilizes privacy-enhancing technologies on public chain, but also off-chain and interchain. So we're providing it as layer two to other protocols out there that need to do privacy computation, but that technology is also crucial for AI learning.
Awesome. I'm Mauricio. I head product for Midnight, and I host the Block Drops podcast. So we're getting on with it because time is of essence. So we're going to talk a little bit about the current state of AI and data privacy. So in your opinion and experience, what have been the stance of the industry and regulators when working in this intersection of data privacy, data protection, and AI? Especially, I mean, Shirley, Partisia plays in a little bit of that space. What has been your experience in the industry itself, and how do you think regulators are approaching that space right now, if at all?
They are in the Web3 space a lot, as well as Web2. There are more and more regulations being enforced, the GDPR, different data protection regulations across the world. This is where our technology becomes more and more crucial on how you can still process on that data, put it into work, especially when it comes to Web3 applications on-chain, where we're dealing with a super transparent cloud that is publicly visible for everyone. So having like a regulatory-friendly, privacy-enhancing technology in place is the key. We're also working with regulators, with governments, and NGOs. So already for years. So I think we have guaranteed like a good place to be one of these infrastructures that will be there for next 5 to 10 years over some others which have no privacy protection in place. I mean, CK proofs were the first kind of new adoption to provide certain privacy, but there are some limitations. For example, you're only able to use one input and only have binary output, so you're able to verify if something is truth or false, or very limited use cases. So what we provide is a more complex privacy computation. And I've seen a lot of, I mean, I've been every year at the World Economic Forum, being based out of Switzerland. And recent years, when we were at the bear market in crypto, the AI was the new kid on the block all over the Davos and the Down and the conference. And now we're more speaking about the regulating the AI. Because until now it has been very chaotic. Like there has been no compliance over how the data is being used, what kind of data is fed to the AI models and trainings, and how overall the data is being used. I mean, a huge all of you might have heard of WorldCoin, what they did with this iris scans of millions of people. And not having any privacy-enhancing technology in place. Now we're actually in talks with them because they realized that secure MPC is something which would solve their problems as well.
Got it. What's your experience in that intersection? I mean, looking industry, regulator participation, and how they sit on it.
For us as a cloud provider, we meet, personally, I discuss with a lot of startups who needs to be compliant in how they store the data and how they protect them in order to be compliant. And then if I can say, you have three aspects. You have how do you get the data is it like scraping website? Is it data that is given to you? Is it data coming from social network? And then how you store them, and then how you use them. So you have different aspects regarding data privacy. I would say we see a lot of startups that need to get compliant regarding the data, mostly having them based in Europe with a European cloud provider because their customers are going to be big corporations in Europe and don't want to see sensitive data being stored and potentially accessed by non-EU companies, but also there are these grants given by Europe for startups, and in the rules, they need to use a European cloud provider. So they are dependent on that also. The EU, the regulator in some way, enforce it by, I give you money, but you need to have the data stored in Europe by a European cloud provider.
Got it. So it's more like, it is data protection, but it's also somewhat like market protection to some extent, I guess. Are there any examples of either of your experiences where we've seen, I know responsible use of AI is kind of, it's a tricky territory, but let's go with that for a while.
Ethical use.
Thank you. So have you maybe it's even that is tricky to get, but are there any examples of AI projects that you've known of, or maybe you don't need to disclose the names, but use cases where there is responsible use or ethical use of AI in the way that they handle the data that they source for the corpus for training, or even the data that is applied to it to benefit from the models, that at least starts to point to a direction of where, yes, we can do ethical or responsible use of AI when it comes to protecting the data or leveraging data that is made for that use?
I think you have some verticals where potentially you won't have the choice, because if you take AI-based decision-making algorithm, like for banks or insurances, you don't have a choice because not only you need to protect the data of your customer, but if you don't have something that is ethical and also needs to be GDPR compliant, because technically GDPR compliance, you have access to not only and owns the rights toward your private data, what you own and what's about you, but also in AI decision-making process, you have the right to ask what's not in a very deep and technical, because we understand that they might not have the ability to do it, but at least what are the main criteria that are in the algorithm to make the decision making. So I think some verticals, even if they wouldn't want to, they will have to comply. And also, just as a brand love, you know, like to avoid that it backfires on you, that the lack of transparency on how things are being handled, they'll have to anyway from a brand perspective. I don't know if it makes sense.
Is there any project or use case that you've seen that plays in that ethical, responsible use of AI when it comes to data privacy?
Well, as I just mentioned, I did mention the name WorldCoin, what they have done in the past.
I thought that was one that wasn't.
Yeah, but they are looking for ways now, and they have no other chance because they already got the regulators scrutinize them on their behaviors, if not penalized. So I can't recall any other concrete project right now, but I think perhaps decentralizing those AI training models would do some benefit on creating this transparency and prove the ethical training of the data.
Yeah. So we're in a crypto event. It is my belief that AI needs blockchain. If we are to use AI responsibly to some extent, we'll need forms of blockchains that can ensure that only the right data that's being approved on the right region is being used. Also trace the source of that data as privately as possible so you can actually reward the use of that data, because right now, our data is pretty much free to use anywhere. But I would gladly give some of my most precious data if I knew I would be rewarded for that, I think. But that said, in terms of current and future developments, what are the trends you're seeing? So you just spoke about WorldCoin trying to come into the space where they are more responsible in using the data that they've sourced from eyeballs in the world. What are other developments that you feel are necessary for the industry to move towards that? We can talk about blockchains, obviously, but are there any other mechanisms or even regulatory trends that you can spot that would take us to a better place in introducing AI more responsibly and preserving data privacy?
I think the federated learning model, collaborative training of AI, where actually, exactly as you mentioned, individual users could train your AI models and at the same time get rewarded for it, and they get rewarded for selling the use of their data, not for the data itself. And it's still privatized. It's encrypted, but it's on public chain. So I see the trend moving towards that direction. And if we check the past, like how the telecommunication moved from public to encrypted, how the internet, like HTTPS moved to HTTP moved to the secure version. So I think, and we're also seeing that in the Web3 space now, I think that will move the same direction in the AI vertical. We need to have security and privacy technologies in place in the overall evolution in order to the technology to be adopted and data protected and to create a more fair playing field.
Anything on your end?
That's funny because before joining, we had this discussion where I was saying using blockchain and with smart contract would allow you to decide on which data you want to make available or not and to be used. I'm just wondering on the adoption, the same way then there is the adoption of Web3 takes time. Because of the technological barriers, how much would it be the same in AI? And in the same way, then I think a lot of it is also linked to the fact that it's a field that has been existing for a very long time, but suddenly with the compute power that is a lot easier to access to, the field has accelerated very, very quickly. And how much all of that is also linked to a lack of knowledge and training inside the organizations in order to be compliant and really understand what are the risks also. And on that side, I think it's how much first there is a need to internally to better understand AI, and how much then the blockchain part can also help and make it more compliant, just because now the data privacy is really managed by the person who wants the data.
Yeah, yeah. We had a headline recently that the algorithm for the fresh stores at Amazon, I think, they found out that they were annotated by people, right? And this is an actual function in the AI infrastructure, is to have someone annotate and give meaning to data that's been coming through the pipeline that helps train and retrain the models. Maybe that's also a part of where blockchains might come into play, meaning if you have traceability of how the data is being annotated, then you can actually know what conclusions led to that, which ultimately would even indicate without a doubt where bias is being introduced into the models, which is one of the big problems with the ethical use of AI, is that because it's being trained by us, and we are very much biased, our bias by nature also permeates the models, and then the models just replicate more and at a much larger scale our own biases. So I think there is, even in the lower end of the AI methods, we'll see opportunity for undeniable, immutable, provable data coming from the blockchain to help better models, right? I like that you brought up the ethical side of things, because how do we measure that if we don't have provable source of the data, which you already have technology that does that, combined with the models? I think we get to a point where, I'm not saying we're going to be able to eliminate bias, because I don't think that's going to change in our nature as a species, but we'll be able to spot that and then maybe adjust models and apply models to specific use cases in ways that currently are, if not impossible, probably not of interest at this stage, right? So I think that's another space. Now,
Mauricio, sorry, I have a question and I know you are the moderator.
You're going to turn that on me.
No, but and potentially for Shirley, because I'm not really a blockchain, I'm not an expert at all, but I'm just wondering, despite the fact that there is transparency and more potentially control on your data, what's the pain point of using blockchain for data privacy compared to simple encryption? And encryption you don't have, but it's potentially requires maybe less work than passing on chain, no?
So I think the models that are evolving with ZK, with MPC, as Shirley was pointing, I think we're going to start to see, because of the decentralization, you don't have a single point of failure. So the cost of becoming a honeypot is much lower. I mean, you don't become a honeypot, but now the way you sit the data on chain will vary. It could be encrypted, it could be under a proof, it could be under an MPC artifact. But the fact of the matter is that you now can't go and break into a particular server and then steal all the data that's there. Even if you read the data that's on chain, unless you have the specific business context in that particular cryptography, you can't unravel that information. So we have layers of protection that are becoming increasingly more sophisticated. And obviously, if you have the counterpart on the model that they can break that into as they ingest the data, then obviously you have a better stance. It doesn't mean that it's easier. It doesn't mean that's cheaper. It means just that you have better data protection when you're using for that particular use case. What's your stance on it?
Yeah, that's exactly that. You won't have any centralized owner of that data, as ChatGPT does right now. So, and especially important is the jurisdiction management, right? So that's what we do as well. Before any node becomes a processor of the privacy layer on our chain, has to pass the KYB, prove where their IP and where their servers are sitting, to make sure that data which cannot exit a certain jurisdiction won't do that. So that's another compliancy concern.
Yeah. So a little bit of a wishful thinking exercise for the both of you. I'm not going to talk to that. But what is the one thing you wish the regulators would focus on in the next, say, 12, 24 months to enable that ethical, responsible use of AI when it comes to data privacy? Given everything we spoke here and your own experiences, what is the one thing that you would hope the regulators would focus on for that aspect, and why is that the one thing? If
I go first, I would say I don't I don't know how much is of the responsibility of the regulator, but better inform people on or citizens on how to deal. I mean, in some ways, we already have GDPRs and it has been pushed a lot, but even with that, I'm not even sure people really understand that they can ask any company that has their information to be erased completely. And so it's more like on transparency of how my data are used. Enforce it, because even if you have rules, if they are not enforced, well, rules don't serve any purpose. But yeah, better informed citizens, because I would think that uneducated educated people would put more pressure and would potentially contribute on the ethical side by putting pressure on how their data are used, which I don't believe nowadays people really know how to do that.
Oh, I don't think the average citizen understands what their data is doing on the internet, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. You?
I mean, if it continues the same way as it started, it would only create like a monopoly and power of owning data of the whole world in only a couple of people's hands. So it's extremely dangerous situation to be in. So Europe is leading the way in regulating it. Just recently passed the AI protection and data protection law. But we need to have like universal standard that all governments would enforce to different AI processing companies or data processing companies for their AI models. So yeah, I hope that they would be working on that quickly enough.
And is there any indication of either of your two hopes that there are major jurisdiction regulators? Are they indicating anywhere? Have you seen or have you spoken with any of the regulators that you work with? Are they actively pursuing some of these things? Do you think that there's going to be required from the industry itself to reach out into the regulator and have that kind of open conversation about what standards we expect them to set? Or are you seeing, or are you not seeing any of the regulators move, and how do we actually engage to them? Because I assume the regulators are not going to go anywhere. They just need to be better and get better at these things as the time goes on. So how do we, as an industry, can entertain that to expedite that?
I'm not sure.
I mean, we can invite them to BananaConf for sure, but
Yep.
What else can we do on a day-to-day basis that as an industry, we create that dialogue? We'll have Sander run this every week, and then you bring them in.
Probably similar how it happened with the Web3 regulations, like working in some close environments where both stakeholders can sit together and discuss their needs and problems, and as well as education from both sides between each other. I'm not sure how it's being done right now, as I'm not so much focused on AI rather than Web3 and blockchain. So, but I would say it would be a good way to work around regulations, which would satisfy both parties.
Industry collaboration.
And and not like hinder the innovation.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't expect a regulator to move as fast as innovators, because then we would be probably in trouble. But I think partnering is kind of where the sweet spot is, I think.
No, but they have to. That's why the AI Act that just passed at EU level went actually pretty quick. On usually things like take
legislature
a lot of time to pull out a legislation like that, and it's probably only the version 1, and there will be a version 2, you would think, because technology is going to evolve.
Yeah.
The
problems will also evolve.
Exactly. So it will, and I'm sure the regulator is keeping an eye on things, on how they evolve, and they get feedback all the time on how things could be better and improved and more ethical and respectful for the citizens.
Got it. We're at time. So how can people know more about you and your companies? You first.
Check out Partisia, blockchain.com, or Google MPC, secure MPC, and you'll find Partisia. Because I think we're the only one out there that has combined blockchain and MPC. One of our founders, Ivan Damgaard, actually invented the technology 35 years ago. And I'm happy to see that it's finally being adopted and it's actually solving real-world problems.
Awesome.
And myself just looked on LinkedIn for Pascal. I'm sure even Pascal at Tallinn, I'm the only one. So, but you can find me very easily, and Scaleway, same scaleway.com. That's scaleway.com.
You can find me on LinkedIn as well, Mauricio Magaldi, and on docs.midnight.network and Block Drops podcast. Thanks everyone. Thanks both.
Thank you, Mauricio, for being an amazing moderator.
Thank you. Thanks.